Yeah. I was like, whoa. Hold on a
That's
second. I was actually,
I think it's
11:30 to 12 and then nothing. Nothing.
not.
question. If you're tweeting about live,
Right.
you aren't live.
Unless you.
They're my 1,000 tweets for the year.
I'm gonna try to.
Let me schedule them.
I don't do anything. I just.
That model, right? Merry Christmas. I mean, I know what's happening.
I put the banner on the black market.
There's something wrong?
No, I just need to put a slide up for if you're using your laptop.
Oh, I am, sorry.
Are you using Arios at all?
No,
Okay, I just need to put that up.
thank you. Good afternoon, barely. Congratulations on the end of Cali. Having this as a capstone, I'm sorry if it disappoints. Actually, digital repositories is something I am. Just a little bit about me. I just moved to Atlanta. I am digital services librarian at GSU. I started February 29th, which means if I stay for 30 years, then let's go on a leap year or leap year day. Before that, I was assistant and research librarian. Law firm data is very rich and lots of metadata. Matter numbers, the ability to pull dockets together with their internal repository or something that was coming to Georgia State. This was part of the reason I came, was to work with repositories. And what we have is, that's better. What we have is Bepress, and to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of Bepress, but at the same time, I'm also a fan of Bepress, which hopefully we can get into. But just to have an idea, does anyone have a Bepress repository? Okay. How many of you are responsible for content? Okay, so that's good. I'll have a lot of relevant things, hopefully, to talk to you guys about, and feel free to jump in at any time. This is a small group, so if you have a question or a disagreement even more interesting, please jump in. Just to kind of give you an idea of what's happening with open access, perhaps libraries were slow to respond, perhaps institutions were slow to respond to the internet, but they've been picking up. This is the Registry of Open Access Repositories, and you can see there's over 4,000 repositories that have put themselves in the registry, which means potentially there's 4,000 different silos of data that aren't talking to each other, and 4,000 potential silos of data that we can go in and access and manipulate. So maybe more relevant to Bepress is looking at what's going on with Bepress. So there are 471 institutions using Bepress, and of that, 68 are law schools, which is a pretty high number if you think there's roughly 200 ABA-approved law schools. So over a quarter are using this platform, which is interesting that we are kind of a faux consortium just by the nature of kind of using the same platform. So to move into what I'm going to try to do today is I want to be very high level and kind of move down. So look at stated repository goals, then do a domain analysis of how repositories are in action. And this is where I'm a bit of a zealot, because in 2013 I worked with the IROD system, which is a consortium distributed data system, and they kind of, I don't know, brainwashed me into their way of thinking. So the domain analysis will get a little bit to that. Then I will look at Bepress as implemented by law schools, and I'm going to say kind of on this because basically over 300,000 records have been published with OII through law schools, and I went in and grabbed those and then found out, hey, this doesn't actually link to the underlying content. So then I had to go into the web pages and scrape the web pages just to kind of see what was going on. And once you start to deal with that many web pages and that much data, it starts to get interesting trying to crunch all those numbers. So I didn't do as much as I wanted to, but I have all of the information now, and that's something I'll be looking forward to in the future. Then I want to drill into implications to what I'm doing right now, and that is populating a faculty commons, which is difficult clearing copyright and all sorts of implications of, hey, we don't want to publish this, but we want to keep it. Hey, this is the metadata that Bepress has for published data, but we have all this other stuff we kind of want to keep track of, and the implications for that workflow. And this is where I get into a lot of scripting, so maybe I'll gloss over that if that's not interesting to anyone. But just the power of a little Python and not having to do all this manually. And then loop back around and hopefully talk about implications to the future and how are we keeping our data? Do we want to datify? What tools are going to be made? How do we... So looking at stated goals, I went to a bunch of places. There's basically the idea in the repository is there's a front end and there's a back end. So we want the users to be able to access our data. Hopefully there's some sort of preservation layer, and then there's actually our underlying content. So if we're looking at stated goals, it's all about kind of this front end, discovery, collaboration, research. The reason we're holding all this information is we want outcomes, and we want to be able to demonstrate those outcomes. But then there's the back end, which is, what I'm saying, the through process is collection, long-term preservation, and this is what comes into play over and over again, is if we have digital data and born digital data, and we're the publishers, what about 500 years from now? How do we ensure that people know that it's the same data that we published the first time that it actually exists 500 years from now? So preservation is a big concept in what are we doing with this data? And then the one I like, and I want to point out as a goal, is migration to evolving technologies. So we're a repository. How do we publish our data to tools so they can utilize this in new ways? Again, this is the simple concept, and I want to first look at a consortium model, and this is the IRODS model that I used in 2013. If you're looking at these images and it's a bit overwhelming, it is, but I can break it down into something simple. But before that, let me read some boring text. The IRODS model, IRODS stands for Integrated Rule-Based Data Systems. And the people using this are no small players: NASA, NOAA, iPlant, also libraries, Texas Digital Libraries, if you are familiar with what they're doing, or the French National Library. So a wide range of different users are using this model. And the idea is, if we want to keep something for forever digitally, how do we go about doing that? So hardware changes. Over time, things get more efficient, things are no longer viable. So those different hardware systems keep having to plug in. So there's a middle layer that absorbs hardware changes. And the idea too is we don't want to be stuck on one hardware system. So do we want to keep 14 copies of something? Do we want to keep it around the world? We want to keep it on different types of hardware. So there's a middle layer, and on top of that is, and I'm oversimplifying, is a policy layer and then a user layer. So the policy layer does all of the microservices. So basically it's auditing all of your data. My data in this location matches the other 14 locations. What's the checksum of this data? What was the checksum of this data 30 years ago? Does it still match? What's the integrity? Because the idea of these data sets, if you're thinking of NOAA or NASA, is they want to be able to access a data set 100 years past and know that that's the actual data that existed. So this is the same thing with National Archives. You want to know that if you're doing research on a historical figure, if there's some document that was in one place, is that still the document 500 years later? So the microservices take care of the manipulation of the data, and then that also gives policy-based access to users. So if you think about all different types of data that researchers might want to use, if you think like HIPAA, we might want to scrub user information, but then give that information to researchers. How do we ensure that we are complying with HIPAA with our data? Again, that's the policies. The policies are continually going over the data and creating checksums, and then those checksums, they're getting pushed back into an audit trail. And again, the audit trail now has to exist over time. So in theory, the audit trail for a document 500 years from now could be much bigger than the actual document. Because if you think thousands of years of auditing, how can you ensure this? So that's the IROD's basic model is hardware, middle layer, policies, user access. And not all users have the same access. Not all users can manipulate data. It's a very policy-based system. And the idea is we can then federate hundreds of distributed data sets into one big consortium. Looking at these consortiums that have come together, they have these kind of forward-moving goals, which I think is important to consider because I think they're ahead of institutions who are just entering the realm of putting data into repositories. And the big thing they've been talking about that I was noticing was interoperability and sharing. And the idea of this passive OAI publishing of data and then hoping someone comes in and harvests it, it doesn't work when you get to a large amount of data. So they want to be able to push data to where it needs to go and not have this metadata that's not descriptive. Once you get to, say, 1 billion documents, if you're not having to know and lookup, metadata isn't that useful. So what are tools that we can actually go in and look at the underlying data, the underlying information? So moving on to that is tools. How do we develop tools in these consortiums that allow researchers to manipulate large data sets? So again, if you think about in the law realm, researchers might want all of Supreme Court documents, and then they want to manipulate that data for citation analysis or natural language processing. How can that user, when you have, okay, we have all the Supreme Court documents, how can they request everything and then manipulate it? How can they just manipulate it on the archive side and not have to download the data? Tools for data for specific users. Another problem and goal is quality assessment of content. If you allow multiple institutions to upload content and share content, you're obviously going to have a lot of junk. If you can't find the good content because you're wading through all the junk. So how do you assess quality and then maybe decide what you're going to keep over time, what you're going to get rid of? Another one is automatic provenance and state information. It's not enough just to download a docket. You want to know, is this docket genuine? Who's touched it? Who's manipulated it? To automatically have that as part of the metadata when you get the document. It's not enough just to say, yes, I found what I'm looking for. You also have to look at, is this genuine? And again, that goes to developing these for 1,000 years from now. Not just, will someone use it 2 years in the future? If we are a repository, what's the long-term goal? And another thing is assessment of impact. People want to know, like, people are human, people want to know their research is important or their data set is important. If you're going to get the buy-in and people are going to give you their content, there has to be some sort of assessment loop to importance of content. So I think it's important to see how they're moving ahead in their goals. Another interesting repository move is this commercial repository move. So if you look back at the consortium, basically it's like we're going to make tools on top of our data. If you look at the commercial, basically they're saying, we have these really cool tools, why don't you give us your data? And that's what's happening. So SSRN was the early tool. They're not doing much now, but if you look at, say, ResearchGate, academia.edu, or Google Scholar, they are encouraging scholars to give them their unpublished documents, their published documents, even their data sets, by giving them tools. So one of them is a social aspect. If you upload a document into academia, then you can start to tag other authors. You can see what they're reading. You can see what they're tagging. So you get this idea of no longer is it about after being published. It's about before being published. It's about ideas. It's about interdisciplinary research. You look at Google Scholar, an interesting move or tool where they talk people into uploading their content is they'll actually do citation and natural language processing of your research, and they'll start suggesting, hey, have you seen this? So no longer are you doing searches passively, they're pushing. So there's a social aspect, there's analysis, and then there's also for Google, go in there and you can see how many times people have cited you. All that's automatically being fed to you. So they're encouraging people to just give their content just by creating the tools. And then we have our classic self-hosted, and I won't get too much into this because I don't know if people don't understand, but basically the idea is self-hosted is you get the content, you add the metadata, you have a preservation step, and then basically it's up to you to, you can self-publish to OAI and hope some people come and harvest your materials, or you can publish to your own website, you can have your own index and your own finding tools, but these again are more in the data silo arena, and it's less impactful, but I think a lot of people are still pursuing this. So with kind of that analysis, looking at Bepress is interesting because it's a cloud solution. So it takes care of your back-end management, it takes care of your front-end management. Basically, it's software as a service. It's a black box. So there's no updates, there's nothing you have to do. So I think the interesting part of the back-end is it does support lots of types. Not, of course, developed for law, it's still developed for all academic institutions. Another fun part of it is joining content together. So you can search across repositories. So you have this kind of faux consortium aspect where your finding tools isn't just about your data, it's about shared data. And then I think where libraries like the most of it is this website creation. So individual faculty pages, they have the same kind of look and feel, you kind of know what you're expecting, and then you have the ability to create collections. So the big advantage I see from this and that Bepress is pushing is if we're taking care of all the back end and the updates, focus on content. About publishing, so if you're a law review, now you're publishing online, you don't have to worry about any of that. All you have to do is worry about the hard part, and that's publishing. If you're a library and you're collecting content, it's hard enough to go through the process of clearing permissions, deciding what content upload, create collections. They'll do the heavy lifting of the back end. You can getting content. And I think that is a very valid and important benefit. And the reason I would say I love Bepress is because trying to catch up for an institution to digital and a repository, there's a lot of back end work to do. So at Georgia State University, fortunately, we're a young school, 1983, so we don't have that much back end to push into. But I can imagine an older institution trying to collect the output of their scholars, of their institution, or anything that they want in the repository. That really is quite a task, and something you don't want to focus on the back end. So I'm sure most of you have seen this. Just every Bepress is kind of like every other Bepress. You can see basically all the things you can collect: centers, education, institutional publications, which is important to law schools with law reviews. We're in a kind of a unique situation where we are publishers and have been publishers for years, where other institutions are now becoming publishers and saying, hey, it's born digital, why are we going through a publishing step and then buying the content back? We're just going to publish it ourselves. This is something that law schools have been used to for years. And then the other things I'm seeing all over the place, of course, is faculty scholarship in a collection, but also faculty scholarship on promotional pages. Then the back end has these kind of odd workflows. If you think it's designed for publishing, you have a publishing workflow, which is difficult if you're just collecting to get all that information in. But again, you do have workflows, you have minimal metadata. This is all taken care of by Bepress, and you don't have to think about it. Another benefit is the publishing of OAI, which I think is interesting because we see the bigger consortiums trying to get away from this, but it does make your metadata available to harvesters. This is kind of the Bepress way, is we'll give you options. You have 3 options. Take your pick. It's kind of a hold the pickles, hold the lettuce. We can do some special things for you, but at the end, you're going to get a hamburger. So just be happy with the amount of customization we can give you. And I think looking at every one of the OAI published metadata for each law school, it's amazing the range of description you're getting. Some is just you're going to get title, you're going to get author, you're going to get date created. That's it. Others are doing qualified Dublin core, and they're, is this a docket? It's describing the docket number, but again, it's getting pushed into qualified Dublin core, so we don't really know it's a docket number. So the description, even for people trying, getting pushed into these 3 options is really doing a disservice to what we can describe. The other thing which is interesting is Bepress takes care of your data backup. So I was wondering, where are all our documents located? It's in Kansas, somewhere in a server farm. So again, the cloud, we have no idea necessarily where our information exists, but Bepress assures us that, and I have no reason to doubt it, that they're using industry standards for backups, and they do backup. This doesn't do anything for provenance. We have no idea who went in there and changed our data, who could have changed a document. Probably not that big of a concern for a law review, but a lot of institutions are using this to actually upload primary law, so it could be a concern for primary law if someone did want to try to change the record. The other thing I want to note for this is they mention their financial health in safeguarding your content, and that is something to think about. Is right now there are 400 and whatever institutions using Bepress, but if people migrate away from Bepress, they turn the lights off one day, and that's where we put all of our data. We don't really own our data as software as a service, and that's not really so repository-like. So it's something to think about, as preservation is an important point that repositories need to take into account. We're not thinking about this data for the next 10 years. We're thinking about this data for the next 1,000 years. How can we ensure someone 100, 1,000 years from now that this is the same data? And then just to point out a note that just recently, Bepress has given you the ability to export to an Amazon S3 account. So you have to set that up so it's no longer kind of this out-of-the-box thing, but it will give you an archival copy on the cloud if you want to keep it. So if you are thinking of long-term preservation, to consider, maybe not now, but maybe later on in the process, exporting your data and actually owning your data. So this is where I get into a bit of the failure zone of looking at what repositories have done. I didn't take into account that 100,000 plus documents with a computer grind to a halt, trying to process everything, or how slow it was to having to query every web page of each one, because again, we're publishing a URL to the web page that, yes?
Just for curiosity, would you?
I just built my own little.
Okay. It's like there's an SDLC one, but
There's something wrong. I tried to download a library to do this, and it was working great, but there's some sort of mistake in the middle up there, and it crashed my.
Yeah, you can use.
I just built it in Python and then iterated over each. They give you 100 at a time, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I just ended up running like 40 times over. I don't, but I can if you want it. Want the
Talks, yeah.
purpose was to, okay, so I'm trying to get to informing myself, because I've been tasked with creating a faculty scholarship commons. Why not look at what everyone else is doing and say, how does this inform what I should be doing? Does this give me ideas? Because I'm looking at this big domain analysis, I'm seeing records, I'm seeing what the underlying records are, I'm seeing now they're piping it and dumping it. This doesn't make any sense for me to parse it. So if I can't parse other people's records, what do I want to do with my own records? That was the purpose of this. So just, and also looking at, if we're spending all this time to create these repositories, what is actually the content? So my little scraper last night failed me getting into the underlying content, so I only was able to pull out 264,411. But these are hopefully representative of what the underlying content is via law schools. And I think it's actually quite good. If you think about this concept of Bepress saying, we'll take care of the back end, you guys get the content. There's a lot of content that's been collected. So just looking at it, only 5% link out to other web pages, and most of these are YouTube and other media. So the question of that too as a repository is obviously a YouTube video isn't a long-term way to keep something. If that's the goal, then having to download that information and keep it in some way. But 85% had content in PDF, which was amazing to me. And I think probably the reason for that is the sheer number of law reviews using Bepress to publish. How much that relates. Yes?
That means
10% have nothing attached. 5% are leaking out. 85% actually have content.
Okay.
So they 85% own the content they're talking about, which
So
is
they have records in digital commons.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that seems kind of useless.
No documents.
No, I have one. Our faculty workshop series.
But if we look at
This story.
GSU's repository and faculty publications, actually we have 2,400 citations, and this was done to figure out what we were going to get. So just to upload, just going through, CDs, historical works. Now we have 2,400. Most of our stuff doesn't have underlying PDFs because we haven't cleared permissions yet, and we haven't done that. We have 150 outbound links, and I went and looked at those, and all but 22 were actually backed up in the Wayback Machine, which was interesting. So then I pulled Wayback Machine URLs. So if those ever go away, I have a copy I can immediately refer to. 22 weren't backed up in the Wayback Machine, which then I asked Wayback to please make a copy. And all but seven had robots that excluded this. But that's another interesting concept too that I would like to look at every other law school and say, okay, let me look at all your outbound links. How many are broken? How many are backed up in Wayback? How many could be backed up in Wayback? Because even if you don't have permission to something and you want to link out to it, you should have a Wayback copy. It's so easy to request. You can also automate that with the script. So, yes?
Yeah, how do you do that?
I can get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Just to circle back around, because this is where I'm trying to, let's inform Jonathan, because it's all about me, right? Let's inform Jonathan how he should build out his faculty publications section of the website. So again, circling back around to the stated goals, discovery, collaboration, and research. Back in collecting, I want to collect everything. Preservation, I'm wary about Bepress as a preserver. And then migration to other.
Can I just kind of like say something? There is actually like an ISO standard for preservation, and that's Trusted Repositories Audit and Certification. Bepress Digital Commons, I don't think has this. like I did some quick Google searches, and it is in your American Association of Law Libraries preservation policy. It says trusted repositories,
But
audit
they do
certification.
say
So-
industry standards, so we don't know what that means. It is a black box. That's the thing about,
Well-
that is the idea of Bepress. It is a
Yeah.
black box.
Yeah, I just saying that in case, so preservation, there is a standard, and it's a different feel from, like, institutional repositories.
Thank you.
And
I think the more interesting would be how many of us are using content, because I'm not using it for preservation.
Yes, this is
Journals upload.
They don't upload, I do that for them, but yes.
They have their own preservation.
So, no, please, no, please go on. The idea is the Wayne Gretzky principle, and all of this was really just an excuse for me to talk about. Really, I fooled you, and up to this point, what I really wanted to make was, the Wayne Gretzky principle is, he was smaller than everyone, he was slower than everyone, he didn't have the idea was, he would always say, I'm going to skate to where the puck is going, not to. So he could see a play develop, and he's going to go where he's supposed to go, and that's what made Wayne Gretzky the great one. So the idea is, with the domain analysis, is where are things going, and that's where I want to skate with this small collection. So the idea is this is. If I don't think Bepress has the greatest tools, I don't want to use Bepress. I really just want to use it as a front-facing tool for the law school, but I also want to service the faculty members. So I want to keep my own internal database, all my own internal documents, and make it in a way where I can publish to whatever the best tool is. So a lot of our faculty members want to export to ResearchGate, want to export to academia, want to go to Google Scholar. Who knows what that's going to be 5 years from now? I want to be able to keep my content and then push it wherever I want it to go. So if this faculty member thinks this is the best tool for his content, I need to automatically push everything there. Or push what he wants there. So basically make it as a service. So this is the workflow. And then scripts are going to hopefully do most of this heavy lifting. I've written a lot of them and tested them, and they seem to work. So start, export Bepress metadata, and this is the beauty of the work I don't have to do. People have already gone through CVs and created this nice bib list for me. I don't have to do that. I only have to update it. So export those and then into my own internal database. And since I have GRAs, I'm going to make that really easy. It's going to be Access, because I can connect to that with my own scripts with an OBDC connection, so I don't really care what database it's sitting in. I can move that to other places. Then we're in the process right now of clearing or not clearing permissions with the different publications. So even if a faculty member says, no, I don't want this posted, still go through the step of clearing publication. Will we have the ability in the future to publish this? Or if not, we still want to get it, but we want to tag it in our database. We can't publish this on the front side. We still want our internal record to have it. Then obtain available documents. This is documents and data sets. So as a repository of the institution, I don't just care about the published document. I want the pre-published papers, I want data sets that were used, I want to collect all of that. So I have a script for Hein right now, and I'll show that basically you can go in and search by author name and then you can grab the metadata, you can grab the location of the PDF, and then you can loop that back around and check it with your own database. If it's a match, title match, and author match, go ahead and grab the PDF. So that leads us to our next step, is manipulating documents. And again, there's a script for this. You're going to get that nice Hein cover page. Take that cover page off. If there's a cover page, assert OCR, add our own cover page if we want to, with, again, the metadata that's in our own database. There's other things to do, like citation analysis. We can pull citations. I hate having to manipulate PDFs, but to pull that text and then put it into some other format where maybe in the future I'm thinking all of your paragraphs that cite to this statute, in this case, I can just give at the paragraph level as opposed to here's a whole PDF that's somewhere in there. That's not so useful. So in the stage of how do I manipulate this PDF and then pull that again into my own database, my own repository. Then bulk uploading to Bepress. I'm sure you've all had the pains of their bulk process and then having to go in and upload a PDF separately. So it's a big time-consuming process. Again, that can be automated. Pushing to the bulk upload is one thing from our own internal database, and the other one is running a web driver to upload the PDFs. So you have to, they don't have a nice API, or if they do, someone please tell me. Upload the PDF after you upload the metadata. You can actually drive a web browser, go through all the steps of the web browser, attach a file, and automate even the uploading of a PDF. Important if we do in the future manipulate these PDFs, live link it somewhere, whatever. We want the ability to change what PDF is in the system and do that in bulk in a batch. Then of course, update works and check metadata. So again, it's the ongoing process. New works coming in, new works being updated. And then 8 is the more exciting to me, is to be able to push all of this data to other platforms. Yes?
If you do want to
I mean, you can be, but again, Selenium WebDriver, very simple, beautiful soup, parsing web pages. It's really easy, and I'll show you a few, 15 lines of code. You can do lots of bulk movement. So, if you're not willing to pick up Python or some other quick scripting language, knowing someone who can to build the easy tool is something to consider. I like to be self-reliant. I don't like, it's a black box, and I have to say, please do this and please do that. When I can just go spend 30 minutes and figure it out myself, and then I have it for life. So, yes?
Why are you taking off the...
Okay, so what happens is I do a Hein brand, and then I press brand, and then I might 15 pages down eventually. We're going to actually get to the content. So I don't know why we need the Hein brand.
The question is, does your MO...
Did get permission from Hein. I don't know that, but I'm glad you asked.
Okay, you might want to...
Because there's a note.
Because I take the cover pages off too.
I
just
take
because,
mine.
Really, well, the main reason I do it is for aesthetic
Because it
purposes.
seems wrong.
Probably, and I might be wrong, and thank you for mentioning that, because I might be
Question from Hein.
To take off the cover page?
Yeah, we'll be sent
Because I just don't know if that's,
We actually,
honestly,
I remember
yes.
having that
and
conversation.
I didn't hear it, so it's very, have permission, and I'm just doing what I can
Definition of
control.
document.
Somebody else.
So this is an example Hein script to automate the downloading from Hein. You can see how few lines of code this is. A lot of work. if no one's interested, I won't go into any dorky detail over the code, but basically, Selenium WebDriver and Beautiful Soup are the two libraries you'll need to do this. Selenium WebDriver will allow you to drive a browser, Firefox, Chrome, whatever. So if a web page is JavaScript dependent, you can still go. You are a web browser, and you can do anything that web browser. The other is Beautiful Soup, which is a very simple parser that breaks down a web page into a tree that you can navigate, and you can actually pull metadata out of. If you had a hind page. Quality control processes, because I know all of our stuff was manually put in. Yes, so basically, yeah, I'd say here's the title field, here's another title field, and then hind's a little funny, so there's actually one little tricky step. They put like the B on the end, and then now you're not. Normalize that, just pull out the B's and the A's.
Like, level of understanding, but I get what you're saying.
Just to normalize in a sense where we're checking the big thing. So I'm not going to check the B. Not these and A's anymore. Then I can check, is this content the same words and are in the same order?
Why are we doing?
Why? Because again, if my data is going to last for 1,000 years, if once I put the metadata on it, I want to make sure that's right, and then I want to say that this has been checked and move on, as opposed to I'm not really sure.
Why like a whole run of a large?
Rights to the PDF, you don't have author's permission to
Oh,
post,
yeah, but you don't-
and he has to get the journal's
You're no
post,
longer,
and he
you're
has
no
to
longer
get the.
under the Hind license.
For a whole journal uploads, that does sound like the.
Yeah, for people who are uploading their law journals, that makes sense.
So then again, just to move on with scripts, Adobe Pro actually tells you how to access. Python, but you can do that. There's also a lot of free libraries. Again, I might want to keep a separate PDF with extra metadata pressed into the back of it, and then upload a different version. So I know that data, because it's in two different spots, whatever's on that PDF, it's going to travel with that PDF. So if I come back to it, I can always scrape my own metadata right back. Bepress bulk export upload, it's great. We've talked about this. Basically, I hate that extra step of uploading a PDF. I can automate that. It's nice. Then exporting and importing to other platforms. So I know right now that ResearchGate and academia accepts Bibtex. So it's really easy to format Bibtex. So to take our internal system, just a download of the bulk download from that into a Bibtex format, and then tell each of our faculty that you have the ability to bulk upload into these different systems. And then if they do that, and they add a new, yes ma'am. Just again, to move our data into whatever the best tool is.
So, you can't do that with SSR.
We haven't touched SS,
Just
because
letting you
everyone
know.
had SSRN, and then the workflow is they have SSRN, they do their SSRN thing. We eventually get it for our repository, and then we're going into these other. So everyone who has SSRN already has. That is our starting point. Which all leads us to kind of this idea of doing all
Many of
this
us are
work.
happy with SSRN.
That is that could be a whole.
Completely different session.
We could just all complain together, and yeah. So I think Bepress is great in the sense of worry about any of this back end stuff. We can worry about that day will end, and we'll have collection, and then we'll be updating. What do we want to do after that? And for the law domain and law review publication, analysis, natural language processing, be able to say this is what our institution output is, questions we want to answer, and we'll have the data. Do we have the ability to push that data to tools to do that? So that's something to think about. As we're moving into actually publishing primary law in Bepress, we have to think about, do we want it to be meaningful 500 years from now, and if so, what are we doing about provenance information and quality? And really, what I would like to push to, because I've been brainwashed, is law consortium. So we can link to primary law straight, because we want to create tools. It's not enough just to give someone a PDF and then have them have to go look. Wes is giving us these nice tools to follow, our research with links. Why are we not doing that? The reason I think is because we don't have consortium, and I hope that in the next decade, that's where this eventually.
Oh, we don't need metadata because.
We'll also just the metadata of the future and creating relationships. So, can a machine traverse something in our field to some other? That's where a lot of the work. The semantic web, there's so much being pursued. Popular answers. We want to know the range of answers. How do we understand data in a much data, but it's going to be a much there's the whole data science field that's no longer the information. That's a whole nother, don't worry about the back end, worry about the data.
stuff. Backed up in Tallahassee. And and now our institution has their own.
First, Georgia, we do use the, digital. Oh, it's, yeah.
Saw that actually when I was going through the records, I was like, ooh, I want to see what these.
Yeah. You know, just clean, yeah.
Access, not,
Yeah.
not.
Access
Like,
their
we want them to see what, you know. All on the servers, they didn't want.
That's, you know. I'm not going on the Slack channel.
Oh, you're close enough to the mic.
Going on the. This situation.
be a problem as we start to push out.
Which is why the bigger consortiums are trying to get away. If you have, full text index.
Special collections, we get very. Pictures of the inauguration of the law school, right? Who are the people in this picture? Yeah, I recognize the governor.
Yeah, and then you're very subjective.
I was handed one of those old binders of CDs, video, and a stack of just paper printout pictures from the. Hey, project!